few years ago, everyone, it seemed, was obsessed with tracing their roots through DNA kits. Family tree sites like 23andMe and Ancestry.com, they were just blowing up overnight. And it's pretty incredible technology. You spit in a tube and suddenly you're 12% Scottish and related to someone you've never met. But that craze, it cooled off pretty quickly once data breaches hit and people realized just how much of their personal information was floating around out there. Well, what's interesting though is that before all of that, no one really cared about pedigree except in two worlds. First was royalty. And that was important because who has the right to the throne? Who carried the bloodline? Who gets to rule? Well, and second was animals, especially horses and dogs. And pedigree matters when you're talking about champions. Breeding lines and values. And yet for some reason, we're still fascinated with royalty, especially the British royal family. And I've never really understood America's obsession with them. If we're being honest, it's a deeply complicated, often messy family with a long history of scandal. But here's the assumption that drives it all. The purer your pedigree, the more noble you must be, which is exactly why people struggled so much with Meghan Markle, the wife of Prince Harry. Think about it. She's American. She's not royal. She's biracial, and she's an actress. And worst of all, she's divorced. And in the eyes of many, she disrupted the entire system. So much so that Harry essentially stepped away from royal life altogether. All that scandal, all the tension, all the obsession with pedigree. And then you open up the Bible and listen to how the Gospel of Matthew begins. This is the genealogy of Jesus, the Messiah, the son of David, the son of Abraham. And right there, right at the beginning, you get names, generations. This is a pedigree. But then something unexpected. Judah, the father of Perez, and Zerah, whose mother was Tamar. Tamar? Well, who's Tamar? Well, she's not royalty, and she's not dignified. She's not what anyone would call pure pedigree. In fact, she's scandal. And that's exactly the point. As we go through this study, we're going to see why her story is so shocking and why it tells us something powerful about the heart of God. Because God doesn't avoid the scandalous. Instead, he steps right towards them. In fact, God's heart is for the scandalous. So let's begin with Genesis chapter 38, verse 1. At that time, Judah left his brothers and went down to stay with a man of Adullam named Hirah. At what time? Well, at the exact moment Judah convinces his brothers to sell Joseph into slavery. We've barely stepped into Joseph's story, and suddenly the narrative shifts. It feels like a detour, and we leave Joseph and follow Judah, one of the very brothers who betrayed Joseph. And it's not a detour. It's intentional. Because Joseph and Judah's stories, they're meant to be read side by side. Even the language mirrors. Judah went down and Joseph was taken down. Same direction, different choices. And don't miss why Judah left. Home had become unbearable. their father was crushed in inconsolable grief. And Judah knew the truth behind it. Every glance, every silence, every reminder of Joseph, it all pointed back to what he had done. That kind of guilt, it doesn't sit quietly. It follows you. It presses on you. It makes you feel suffocating. So Judah leaves, not just physically, but emotionally and spiritually, he runs from the place that exposes his sin. And what we're about to see is what happens when a man runs from his past instead of facing it. Verse 2, there Judah met the daughter of a Canaanite man named Shua. Immediately, there's a red flag, because we've already seen this in Genesis, how deeply it grieved his parents when Esau married Canaanite women. But Judah, at this point, he couldn't care less. Now, all the guardrails, they're gone. The voice of wisdom is ignored. And when a man stops caring about God-honoring voices, he's already further down the path than he realizes. He married her and made love to her. She became pregnant and gave birth to a son named She conceived again and gave birth to a son and named him Onan. She gave birth to still another son and named him Shelah. It was at Kezib that she gave birth to him. And you can see on this genogram here that Judah fathers 3 sons through Shua's daughter. Verse 6, Judah got a wife for his firstborn, and her name was Tamar. Circle her name there. And don't underestimate how scandalous this would have been to future generations of Jews, because Tamar, she's not Jewish. She's a Canaanite. And here's Judah. I mean, he's a deceiver. He's complicit in murder. He's a slave trader now of his own brother. He's a man who married a Canaanite woman, now finding a Canaanite wife, Tamar, for his firstborn son. This is not a clean story. This is not a noble pedigree. And yet, this is Judah, the very man who will become the father of the tribe that produces the Messiah, the line through which Jesus comes. I mean, remember, Jesus is called the Lion of the tribe of Judah. So just let that sink in for a moment. God doesn't build his redemptive story on spotless people, but on scandalous ones. And that's not a problem. That's actually the point. Verse 7, but Judah's firstborn, was wicked in the Lord's sight. So the Lord put him to death. Now, we're not told why was wicked, or what he did, or how he lived. I mean, nothing, just this. He was wicked in the Lord's sight. That's it. And just like that, he's gone. Mark him off the family tree. He will not be in the line of the Messiah. His wife will, though. But the Lord puts him to death. And Tamar is left a widow, which in that culture, it was more than grief. I mean, it was a sentence to a life of vulnerability, instability, and likely poverty, which is why they practice a strange but purposeful tradition to protect the widow, to preserve the name of the dead, and bigger than that here, to ensure the bloodline of the Messiah would endure. Verse 8, then Judah said to Onan, that's the second brother, sleep with your brother's wife and fulfill your duty to her as a brother-in-law to raise up offspring for your brother. Okay, I know this is completely foreign to our culture, but in the ancient world, it was vital. It protected the survival of the family line, and it provided security for widows that through children who would one day care for them. This was called a leveret marriage, and it wasn't just cultural custom. It was later actually codified in the Mosaic Law. I mean, the boundaries for this kind of marriage were laid out in Deuteronomy chapter 25. This is a way of ensuring both compassion for the vulnerable and continuity for the family line. If brothers are living together and one of them dies without a son, his widow must not marry outside the family. Her husband's brother shall take her and marry her and fulfill the duty of a brother-in-law to her. The first son she bears shall carry on the name of the dead brother, so that his name will not be blotted out from Israel. And what that means is that when dies, the responsibility falls to Onan. He is to step in as the brother-in-law to marry Tamar and raise up offspring that will carry on the name of his deceased brother, not for his own legacy, but for Er's legacy. Well, back to Genesis 38, verse 9. But Onan knew that the child would not be his. So whenever he slept with his brother's wife, he spilled his semen on the ground to keep from providing offspring for his brother. What he did was wicked in the Lord's sight. So the Lord put him to death also. I mean, wicked and gross for several reasons. First, he dishonors his brother's memory. I mean, basically using his brother's wife for his own pleasure. And he dishonors Tamar, using her without any intention of fulfilling his responsibility. And here's what makes it even darker. No one knew except for Tamar and God. And on the outside, it looked right. He appeared to be doing his duty. But in reality, it was deception wrapped in obedience. Don't miss how selfish this is. He's protecting his own future while dooming Tamar to hers, a life of poverty, no children to take care of her, no security. And into that injustice, God steps in because God is at work in this scandalous woman's story, and he intends for her to be part of the bloodline of the Messiah. So God judges the wickedness, and Onan dies. Verse 11, Judah then said to his daughter-in-law Tamar, live as a widow in your father's household until my son Shelah grows up. For he thought, well, he may die too, just like his brothers. So Tamar went to live in her father's household. So here's the family tree so far. We had Judah has 3 sons. He's dead. Onan, he's dead. And now Shelah, he's still too young to marry it. And now fear creeps in. I mean, Judah starts connecting the dots that are not real. Maybe Tamar is cursed. Maybe she's the problem. Well, either way, he's not risking his last son, Shelah. So he tells Tamar, hey, go back to your father's house. Wait until Shelah is old enough, but don't miss this. That's not a promise. It's a stall. Judah has no intention of giving Shelah to her. He's done. And in his mind, he's not going to lose another son to this woman as if it's her fault. And the irony? Judah has no idea. It's not Tamar's doing it all. It was the wickedness of his own sons. Verse 12. After a long time, Judah's wife, the daughter of Shua, died. When Judah had recovered from his grief, he went up to Timnah, to the men who were shearing his sheep. And his friend Hirah, the Adullamite, went with him. The daughter of Shua dies, and after a season of grieving, Judah moves on and heads to Timnah to shear his sheep. So this is a routine business trip, or so it seems. But this is a very relevant moment, especially for any of you who travel for work. Be careful who you are when no one's watching. Because on the road, it has a way of loosening convictions. I mean, distance from your wife and from your family and from your people who know you, it can dull accountability. And what feels like a small compromise in a distant place, it can carry very real consequences back home. So walk on business trips in integrity, especially on the road. Verse 13, when Tamar was told, your father-in-law is on his way to Timnah to shear his sheep, she took off her widow's clothes, covered herself with a veil to disguise herself, and then sat down at the entrance to Anaim, which is on the road to Timnah. For she saw that, though Shelah had now grown up, she had not been given to him as his wife. Well, remember, Judah never intended to follow through. He had no plan to give Shelah to Tamar. And in doing so, He didn't just break a promise, he abandoned her. By deceiving Tamar, Judah leaves her exposed to a life of poverty, loneliness, and no future, no husband, no children, no security. So Tamar realizes the truth. She's been lied to. And if anything is going to change, she's going to have to act. So she takes matters into her own hands. And her plan, it's shocking. It's scandalous. She disguises herself as a temple prostitute and positions herself at the entrance of Enaim, a town just before Timnah, right along Judah's path. I mean, you want to talk about scandal? This is it. But God's heart is for the scandalous. Verse 15, when Judah saw her, he thought she was a prostitute, for she had covered her face, not realizing that she was his daughter-in-law. He went over to her by the roadside and said, "Come now, let me sleep with you." Don't miss this. Tamar is not reckless here. She's being strategic. She has a plan. And don't assume this is the first time Judah has approached a temple prostitute. Tamar knows him well. I mean, she lived in his household. She's watched his patterns, his character, his compromises. She knows exactly what will work. And notice, he assumes she's a temple prostitute. That matters. Because temple prostitutes, these women were a part of pagan worship, tied to false gods. And Judah doesn't hesitate. He has no problem stepping into that world. That really tells you something about where he is spiritually at this point in his life. But don't miss the parallel to Joseph. Judah, he's seduced by Tamar. Joseph will see him seduced by Potiphar's wife. I mean, similar setup, but completely different responses. Joseph resists, but Judah, he gives in. And the motives couldn't be more different. Potiphar's wife is driven by lust for Joseph. Tamar is driven by something deeper, survival and justice. She's not chasing pleasure. She's fighting for a future. He's looking for a prostitute. So she plays the part. She steps right into his expectation and meets him there. And now watch closely, because this isn't random. This is calculated. Tamar begins to control the moment, shaping the situation, setting the terms, positioning herself in a way that ensures the outcome she needs. She's not reacting. She's executing a plan. "And what will you give me to sleep with you?" she asked. "I'll send you a young goat from my flock," he said. Remember, he's on his way to the flocks. He doesn't have a goat with him. So he makes a promise. I'll send one to you, a delayed payment, an ancient credit card. And Tamar doesn't let that slide. And she knows a promise isn't enough, especially from Judah. So she presses for a guarantee, setting the stage for everything that follows. "Will you give me something as a pledge until you send it?" she asks. He said, "What pledge should I give you?" "Your seal and its cord and the staff in your hand," she answered. Boom. She's got him right where she wants him. And don't miss this. There's another parallel here to Joseph's story. Tamar is about to receive Judah's seal, his personal mark, his identity, his authority placed into her hands. And in just a few chapters, we'll see Joseph received a seal from Pharaoh, elevated, entrusted with authority, given the signet of power. Same object, completely different paths. One through compromise, the other through integrity. So he gave them to her, and he slept with her, and she became pregnant by him. After she left, she took off her veil and put on her widow's clothes again. Oh, and once again, here's deceptions in Jacob's family. Jacob deceives Isaac. The brothers deceive Jacob. Judah deceives Tamar. And now Tamar deceives Judah. I mean, this is just a cycle of deception that keeps going and going and going. But Tamar, again, she's not reckless. She's actually pretty brilliant, because now she's holding the trump card. A way to prove her right to be provided for as a widow. A way to expose the truth when the time comes. Because she doesn't just have his staff. She has his seal. And a seal wasn't just an object. I mean, it was your identity, your signature, your authority, pressed into clay to mark something as undeniably yours. And Tamar is holding Judah's name in her hand, proof of exactly who fathered the child growing inside her. So when the moment comes, there will be no denying it. And let's be honest, at this point you might be thinking, Brian, I mean, this story is pretty messed up. Yeah, it is. Because remember, the Bible doesn't sanitize the story. It doesn't tell us what we wish happened or what we think should happen. It tells us what actually happened, because it's actual history. God didn't cause the sin here, but he steps right into the mess and he makes sure that this scandalous woman, Tamar, is written into the lineage of the Messiah. Why? Because God is telling us something we don't expect, is that his heart is for the scandalous. Verse 20, meanwhile, Judah sent the young goat by his friend, a Dulamite, in order to get his pledge back from the woman. But he did not find her. He asked the men who lived there, "Where's the shrine prostitute who is beside the road of Enaim?" "There hasn't been any shrine prostitute here," they said. So he went back to Judah and said, "I didn't find her. Besides, the men who lived there said there hasn't been any shrine prostitute here." Then Judah said, "Let her keep what she has, or we will become a laughingstock. After all, I did send her this young goat, but you didn't find her." His reaction here is kind of fascinating. He doesn't go after her. Why? Because he doesn't want to become a laughingstock, exposed for sleeping with a temple prostitute on a business trip, admitting he was out there in the first place. Even worse, admitting that he got played. And on top of that, he has no idea who she is, no name, no face, no way to track her down. It's like someone stealing your identity today, your credit card, your ID, and you have no clue who did it. You feel violated and powerless. And Judah's, he's stuck. Because the moment he pushes too hard to recover what's his, he exposes himself. So he does nothing. He'd rather live with the loss than people discover the truth. Verse 24. About 3 months later, Judah was told, "Your daughter-in-law Tamar is guilty of prostitution, and as a result, she is now pregnant." Judah said, "Bring her out and have her burned to death." Well, if you can't tell, at this point in his life, Judah has zero integrity. He's a walking contradiction. When Tamar is reported to be 3 months pregnant, he immediately condemns her. Bring her out and have her burned alive. I mean, no hesitation, no investigation, just judgment. And the irony, in his mind, there was no problem with him sleeping with a prostitute. But now that he's been deceived, now that he's been exposed, suddenly the standard changes. Now it's punishable by death, burning her to death. I mean, that's how far gone he is. He can't even see the connection between what Tamar is accused of and what he himself has done. It's not just sin, it's absolute blindness. Verse 25. As she was being brought out, she sent a message to her father-in-law. "I am pregnant by the man who owns these," she said. And she added, "See if you recognize whose seal and cord and staff these are." Can you see how smart she was? I mean, Tamar, she had the right to be protected by Judah's family through a levirate marriage. And Judah lied to her, and he and his sons, they failed to fulfill their responsibility to provide a child for her. And now she has proof of his actions, proof of her justification. But don't miss her character. She doesn't publicly shame Judah. That's key. She presents the evidence in a way that gives him the opportunity to respond. And once again, notice the parallels to Joseph's story. First, Tamar uses Judah's staff as proof of what she is saying, and Joseph's brothers use Joseph's clothes as proof of their lie, that he was killed by a wild animal. And then Tamar uses personal items as proof of her vindication. And then Potiphar's wife is going to use Joseph's cloak as proof of the vindicating her lie. Well, verse 26, Judah recognized them and said, "She is more righteous than I, since I wouldn't give her to my son Shelah, and he did not sleep with her again." I mean, Judah, he's been a rotten snake up to this point in Genesis. But here, something shifts, and we begin to see change, much like his father Jacob. And it starts here with humility and with confession. He owns it. No excuses, no deflection, no blame shifting. And notice, he does not go back to her for more. This isn't about gratification anymore. There's a shift in posture, a growing sense of respect now that Tamar has been provided for. She showed restraint by not publicly shaming him. He responds with honesty. And that moment right there is the beginning of his transformation, because we're beginning to see a different Judah that we're going to see through the rest of Genesis. This man, who has been a selfish deceiver, complicit in murder, willing to sell his own little brother, will become the man who offers himself in his brother's place. Now, that kind of change doesn't happen by accident. That's the grace and transforming work of God at work. And don't miss it. Judah's life, his transformation, and his inclusion in the bloodline of the Messiah, the very tribe from whom Jesus will come, all that point to the same truth, that God's heart is for the scandalous. Verse 27, when the time came for her to give birth, there were twin boys in her womb. Does that sound familiar? And as she was giving birth, one of them put out his hand. So the midwife took a scarlet thread and tied it on his wrist and said, "This one came out first." But when he drew back his hand, his brother came out. And she said, "So this is how you have broken out." And he was named Perez. Then his brother, who had the scarlet thread on his wrist, came out, and he was named Zerah. You can see the echoes of the pattern and the promise that God gave to Isaac about his descendants. And that's on purpose. God's signatures are all over this bloodline. The older will serve the younger. Tamar bears twins, and once again, there's an unexpected reversal and jostling for birth order. The line of Judah moves forward not through what is natural or predictable, but through God's sovereign choice. And don't miss it. A scarlet thread, it appears here. A marker, a sign, just like we'll see later with another scandalous woman in Jesus' lineage named Rahab. And this, it is not random. It's intentional. From beginning to end, God is weaving a story that makes one thing clear. God's heart is for the scandalous. Well, back to where we began with British royalty. According to human thinking, remember, the more dignified and pure your pedigree, the more noble and distinguished you must be. But as we're seeing in our verse-by-verse study through the Gospel of Matthew, the kingdom of God, it's upside down. God isn't looking for perfect people like the world looks for. He's looking for hearts that belong to him, even if those hearts come from scandalous stories. I mean, right here in Genesis 38, we meet the first of many scandalous women in the royal ancestry of Jesus. It's Tamar, a woman who disguised herself as a pagan temple prostitute to seduce her own father-in-law. And she's in the line of Christ. And then you turn to the Gospel of Matthew chapter 1, and the pattern continues. Rahab, a prostitute from a pagan Canaanite city. Scandalous. Then you have Ruth, a Gentile, a Moabitess from a nation hostile to Israel. Scandalous. Then we have Bathsheba, involved in an affair with King David that led to her husband's death. Scandalous. And then Mary, a young teenage girl pregnant before marriage. Scandalous. This is the royal lineage of Jesus. Not polished, not pristine, not what anyone would expect. And again, that's the point. God builds his kingdom through the broken, the messy, the unexpected, because God's heart is for the scandalous. And maybe you're listening to all this and it doesn't feel like a Bible story. It feels like your story. Maybe you feel like you're a living scandal. Like there are parts of your past that you've buried, hidden. Things you hope that no one will ever find out, because if they did, they'd look at you differently. And maybe you're right. People might. But God doesn't. The lesson of this chapter is not that scandal disqualifies you. It's that scandal is exactly where God steps in. If you feel scandalous, God loves you. Not a cleaned up version of you, not a future better version of you. He loves you right now. He sent his son, Jesus Christ, to step into broken stories like yours, to take your sin, your shame, your guilt upon himself at the cross, not just to forgive you, but to transform you, to take what feels like scandal and turn it into something beautiful, to redeem your life, to rewrite your story. Because in God's hand, your past, it doesn't have the final word. The final word in your story was written by Jesus' finished work on the cross. Instead of being defined by your past, your life is now defined by grace through him.